Welcome, everyone. This is the third installment of our Student Ambassador Program, class of 2023. The first two were on automotive and then industrial design, and that kind of brings us to footwear, last but certainly not least. And we've had a tremendous amount of signups for this session, so I'm really excited to see what people think of the work from the students. Myself, I'm Shway Sosanya, co-founder and CEO here at Gravity Sketch. I have a background in industrial design, design for manufacturing, spent several years working on consumer electronics, laptops, phones, and such. And then I went into interior design for automotive. And I've always been interested in the footwear space. I always kind of tried to tip my toe in there with a few sketches here and there, but never really got fully into it. So I'm always excited to spend a bit of time with footwear designers and learn about their workflow, the similarities and the dissimilarities in terms of the automotive and industrial design workflow. Also, I really want to talk about the history of Gravity Sketch. So this was a thesis project in academia with my co-founder and myself. And so it was born within the education environment. And I feel so honored that every year we get to give back to the education environment through our ambassador program, as well as our EDU program. We've been running the ambassador program for 3 years. And every year we bring about 100 or so handpicked students into the program, and we give them training, we give them resources, both on the VR side and software side, but also coaching and training through the workflows that they can implement in the digital space. Like digital 3D workflows is really what we try to help them onboard to, and then we let them teach us. So there's also a kind of a 360 experience here. We're really confident in these students because we've seen time and time again, they go on to become key players in companies such as Adidas, New Balance, Nike, Puma, and so forth. And we're very confident that they will become the future leaders of these industries. So today we're going to meet 6 of our program's most talented footwear designers. So you'll be presenting a variety of their work, and they'll be able to share in depth exactly what they did and how they've done it. But also you can ask questions, and we'll try to treat it a bit more interactive. We'll also look at like a lot of the workflow, not just Gravity Sketch, but holistically. What other tools were used in their pipeline and how they bring things to life in the way that they did. And it's all about the spirit of communicating this creative proposition that they're putting in front of us. If you want to personally connect with any of them, feel free to chat in the chat right now. But we also have a link that we'll share where you can reach out to our EDU team and they can do some matchmaking. Of course, if you're watching this as a pre-recorded session, we will also do that if you just reach out to us via email or via our EDU link on the site. And again, I just want to stress, let's make it interactive. Feel free to ask questions. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Francisco to the stage. And Francisco is a freelance footwear designer focused on innovation and is really curious about optimizing his design process. And I think you'll see that through some of the work. I'm also delighted to say that he has been snapped up by Puma and will be working as a 3D designer out of Herzo very soon. So Francisco, the stage is yours.
Okay, hello y'all.
Okay, we're just waiting on Francisco's audio.
You guys can hear me?
All right, bear with us for one moment.
It's weird.
We're still not hearing you, so we're going to
You
try
guys can hear me?
Yeah, we're still hearing. We're going to try to solution this really quickly. 1 second. Okay, we got you here. Oh. Come again?
Okay, now.
Okay. Yep.
So, first of all, hello guys. I'm Francisco Bernal. I will start sharing my screen and then I will start presenting myself and all these things, right? Okay. Okay. Now I think it's cool right now. So I'm Francisco Bernal. I am 25 years old. I am from Colombia. I studied industrial design here in Colombia, but my field of focus is really the footwear design and innovation things. Also, my dream role one day is to become a part of a big team at an innovation lab, such as maybe Puma at this moment, uh, Nike, Adidas, and other brands. Um, so let's start talking just a bit about the project. As you can see, this is my whole project. It's based on a incoming innovative footwear in collaboration with Sellafield. That it's such a big brand that it's trying to change the game of the footwear design. Just trying to 3D print sneakers and these kind of things for uh, these new designers on the industry. So this is the mood where I I have chosen for this project. It's just a bit of textures taken from algorithms, generated textures, uh, the sneakers made by Finn Taylor for Sellafield, the collaboration between Crocs and Salem Bembury, uh, generative pattern textures, topological maps, and different kind of things that inspire me for all the decisions I take it on this design. Then the next step for me was to use Procreate. All my work, all the work I done is starts on Procreate with a rough reference sketch, rough lines, and these kind of things. Uh, I generated these 6 iterations between different shapes, forms, trying to search for the better one and the best one that I feel so comfortable with. So uh, after this process, I started something that I call AI design iterations. I started with Biscom just to have a more clear view about how the final shoe could look like. And then when I have these 3 iterations, I started with um, trying to blend them in mid journey just to have a more realistic view and a different iterations of the sneakers. So this is just a bit of the process. Uh, there are more explorations I made on mid journey, just trying to find the more inspiration about the shape. Um, then when I feel good enough with the explorations using AI, I started making hand renderings and Procreate uh, because at this moment of the process I had a more clear view of the highlights, shadows, volumetric things into the sneakers, right? So I decided to make these hand renderings on Procreate just to uh, see what happens with it. And then the next step was jump into Gravity Sketch. As you can see, here is a last. This is the first step into every design process if you are working on footwear design. um, Last goes first, and then I started sketching some rough lines around the last just to check proportions, the color, the heel, and all these kind of things. um, then when I feel good with the sketching, I go to the surfacing. It was a really cool process because I can understand in a better way the proportions, the volume overall sneaker, and all these kind of things. um, the last step for me in Gravity Sketch was to make a more refined line work over the surfacing, just to get the final detailing of the 3D model, so I can have a more clear understanding of the shape with this precise line work. And then I can, with this line work, I can export it into Rhino, and then start making these kind of things in a way more precise, um, to do all the surfacing, because it's easier for me to achieve um, organic shapes and have cuts, booleans, all these things in Rhino. So it allows me to achieve this result. Um, this is the first view of the final shoe. Uh, then I generated a wireframe view, a turntable render, using the solid, yeah, the solid render, and using the wireframe that I can generated before. Um, and then I achieved this good looking shoe, inspired by all the mood board behind, like Bismuth inspired steps. There's a cool feature that it's reaction diffusion, texture on the outsole, the tooling. Mm, and this is just the final rendering of the shoe itself. It's coming with Sellerfeld in the next, maybe in the next 2 weeks, I guess. So this is really a really cool process to achieve this final sneaker, and that's it.
Oh, that was great. Thanks, Francisco. That was quite impressive. I just wrote a note to myself that the translation from your 2D sketches to your 3D wireframes was like super clean connection. Um, maybe
Yeah,
you maybe you just understand the form really well, so you were able to represent in 2D really accurately, and so in 3D it kind of translated smoothly. I want to learn a little bit more about that workflow. Like, how did that workflow take place with the? It seemed like you had that kind of AI as a co-pilot, right? Where you were feeding it some sketches and then refining and then feeding it again. Can you share a little bit more about the AI workflow? I know this is a big a big subject right
yeah,
now for the industry.
yeah, sure. The first thing I do is to achieve these six iterations. They are different each one, and what I do is to jump into Biscom.
In Viscom,
In Biscom,
sorry,
I get
just a quick question.
some kind of
In
renderings.
Viscom, did you import the sketch, or did you sketch in Viscom natively?
Yeah, in Biscom, I import just the line work
Got it.
sketch, and the AI made all the work behind about the rendering stuffs.
Got it.
You just have to type what you want, and the AI makes the work. When I get the desired results, um, I import. I use the command /blend on Midjourney with these pictures, and it allows me to generate these reference images on the below, as you can see here.
Hmm.
Because basically the command blend on Midjourney allows you to merge, uh, I think, 4 pictures in just and it generates 4 different iterations for you.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I loved about your workflow was just this element of the early and how you're able to like super speed and hypercharge that ideation with the AI process. one of the things that I wrote down and felt was missing a little bit was like, is this a lifestyle shoe, performance shoe? I mean, obviously it's going to be made with
Okay.
Zillerfeld, but wanted to know a little bit about your inspiration around how the user is going to experience this shoe or the wearer.
Yeah, the shoe it's focused on lifestyle. I don't have any other inspiration than just a lifestyle, daily daily use of the shoe.
Got it. And just a couple of small comments around like what's next for you. We obviously know that you're going to go to Puma, and you presented the same project to Puma. How did that
Yeah,
experience? How did that experience go? And kind of what was some of the feedback you were getting from the team over there in Germany?
yeah. I get a lot of feedback about this project. Um, Mostly coming from David Mackenzie, Joseph Trojan, and uh, Benny, Benny Valentini. Uh,
Mhm.
they are the main team of 3D design at Puma, I guess. So they give me a lot of feedback about how 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 have I achieved this this result using a mixture between Great Sketch and Rhino. How to if I can get the same result using, I don't know, Blender, and what more? Maybe uh, one good thing that they told me is that I use a lot of tools to achieve this good looking project. So it's the same that you told me about. I use Procreate, AI, iterations, Great Sketch, Rhino, Keyshot for the rendering. There is a lot of tools involved into the process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're building a toolbox, and you're able to leverage the tools in your
Yeah,
toolbox for big jobs, which is incredible. I know that we have a few folks in the audience. I think we have representation from Lululemon and Converse, and it'd be great if anyone wants to pop any questions in the chat for Francisco before we move on to our next student. Don't be shy.
I think Brett have a question about the physical prototype and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
process.
Did you make any physical progress?
Yeah, at the moment I haven't make any prototype. I'm thinking about making uh, maybe one or two before uh, sending the final production to Sellerfeld. But obviously, it's one of the most important parts of the process to test first the product after make a whole big production. And the process of working with Sellerfeld, it's quite easier since you can find them on the Discord channel. Then you can open a ticket and talk directly with Cornelius or Esbeth or Jonathan. They are able to help you in all the process, send you feedback, tell you what kind of things are bad with your design, what kind of things you can tweak, you can fix. This is the cool part of having the direct contact with him, with the
Nice.
whole team.
Francisco, thank you so much for spending time with us. Your work is, yeah,
Okay,
speaks for itself, and you've gotten a job at one of the best sportswear companies in the world. So I wish you all the best, and I appreciate you spending time today.
thank you.
Gracias por.
Okay, thank you for having me.
All right, so we are going to move on now. We're going to bring in Alan to the stage, and Alan's based in Edinburgh, Scotland, freelance footwear designer and a 3D tutor, teaching his students Unreal Engine, Blender, and Gravity Sketch. So another kind of chest of tools that we're going to see today. And I will turn it over to Alan to share a little bit more about himself and his workflow. So over to you, Alan.
So, hello everyone. I am Alan. I am a product designer. I currently focus on footwear design and I love 3D visualization. As you can see on the screen, I am currently working with Gravity Sketch mainly, but I also use Blender and Unreal Engine for visualization purposes. So, the one thing I really use Gravity Sketch for is 3D modeling. And inside 3D modeling, I would say subsurface modeling is the best that Gravity Sketch can actually provide you because it has actually transformed my design process quite a bit. Because earlier, if you are a traditional CAD modeler, you know the scenes in Blender or any other CAD software, it takes around 2 to 3 days to make a perfect CAD model, especially if it's an organic design like a sneaker. So in Gravity Sketch, when I first tried it out, I was able to like make it in a few hours. So that was a pretty great achievement for me at that time. And later on, I just expanded on top of that knowledge that I had. So here we'll have a look at few of my designs that I have made inside Gravity Sketch, and we'll also talk about the whole workflow where I take designs from Gravity Sketch to Blender. So first, we'll take a look at all these workflows that I use, starting from the sketch. We'll go inside. So basically, I take a last from another software or from any online portals that have that available, or I can also use the surface tool to make the whole shape of the last inside Gravity Sketch, and then I just make it into a plain white background and use the ink tool and quickly stroke it out the outlines, and then this will act as a base for me to 3D model in the subdivision modeling session. So the next part would be me going over each line and actually subdivision modeling inside Gravity Sketch on the next slide. This is usually done with Surface tool, which is one of the best tools. And as I said earlier, this is my favorite tool inside Gravity Sketch. So if you have like a half an hour or maybe 45 minutes would be enough for Surface tool inside Gravity Sketch. So after this, we'll actually clean it up and add the all the extra capsules and pull tabs and insert parts of the sneaker, which actually gives it more of an identity and actually develops the final model. Now I just add the colors and make the final render happen so that I can finally export it to Blender and make the visualizations happen. So now let's take a look at every single individual projects that I've done inside Gravity Sketch. So this is triple bonds. This has been a concept development done during my initial stages using Gravity Sketch. So here I tried to incorporate AutoCAD designs into the footwear design section. So this is the whole workflow that I use right now. Here you can see the subdivided model that I made inside Gravity Sketch. And if you go to the next slide, we can actually see the visualization. So this was then exported into Blender. Uh, I just used the FBX format, which I think is quite great. Also, I used the render settings as in the render view so that I get the exact model inside Blender while importing. Also, I made the animations using the wireframes inside Blender, and that's that. So the next project is called Reinvent. This is another project that was inspired by the automotive industry. I personally love supercars. I don't know about you guys. So I tried to incorporate a lot of design elements from those supercars into the sneaker, but also having in mind that this should be usable and should actually work as a product. So I tried reinventing the sneaker a bit in this design. And here is the model that we talked about earlier. This has all been done inside Gravity Sketch, including the fine details that you can see on the sides. So in the next slide, we'll see the workflow where I actually exported it to Blender. This is the view inside Blender where I animate and visualize the whole environment inside Blender. I also explore different softwares when I have free time. So this is one of the AR visualizations that I did for the design so that you can actually try it on your sneaker, try the sneaker on your feet before actually going into product development parts. So this is really great if you want to visualize it in real life. Now, this is one of my most recent projects. This is actually a 3D print project. The workflow that I use here is quite different from the previous ones because for 3D printing, of course, it has its limitations. So you can't just freely sub demodel anything, especially when it comes to this. And also it's very important to have a solid model for 3D printing. And Gravity Sketch has some great tools that will help you uh, make the correct thickness and shapes. So yeah, so this is the whole process where I took a model made in Gravity Sketch, exported it inside Blender, then just textured the top and bottom surfaces to get the required texture, and then we'll take that into Cura, which is one of the best 3D print softwares out there. So here we can do both the slicing and automation part of the 3D printing designs. So this is really great if you have a printer at home and if you want to try it out, try 3D printing out for them. I'll just let you know Cura is the best software out there for 3D printing. And then we have another personal project. This was actually my final project for college. So this is based on alpine ski boots. So if you take alpine skiing as a whole, the risk of injury is quite high in alpine skiing. So we tried to extend the design and create a newer development to actually bring a more aesthetic version of the alpine ski boots out. So these were inspired by astrology and astronomy. So that was my main inspiration. So speed frame is a design technique that I use quite some time because you can just explode your ideas into a sketch and then finalize it and move on to the 2D render and finally bring it to Gravity Sketch and just build the model exactly like what you had in mind. And then we'll move on to 2D rendering inside Blender and of course then animation, which is also done in Blender. So yeah, that's it. That's the 4 designs that I've done inside Gravity Sketch. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, Alan, this is really good work. Really impressive.
Oh, thanks.
And I love your combination of videos, imagery, and the 3D files. So for everyone watching, Alan was using our screen collaboration application to set up this 3D environment. Really well put together. Kind of wanted to just tap into your automotive inspiration. You enjoy the kind of supercar aesthetic, and bringing it to the footwear it's a really interesting balance because those are our two big industries that use Gravity Sketch, the automotive space and the footwear space. And I'm finding more and more similarities every day. But I rarely ever see like automotive inspired footwear. Maybe share a little bit about what motivated you beyond just the pure aesthetics. Is there anything from a performance perspective that you think we can gain as a footwear industry and learn from the automotive space?
Yes, definitely. Of course, footwear industry is always in the forefront when we come to new adaptive designs. But of course, automotive industry has its own advantages when it comes to aesthetics and performance as a quite big factor in the automotive section. So I tried to incorporate some of those techniques inside the sneaker industry, but it's a long shot. There is a long way to go. So it's still under development, and every day I'm trying to bring a new sort of design out of this concept. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to achieve going forward.
No, it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
4 projects, it's almost a bit overwhelming, to be honest. There's so many angles I can go into and so many questions I have. But one of the things that stood out to me was on one of your earlier concepts, I believe it was the triple bounce. You did just a wireframe directly in 3D around the shoe lasts, and you weren't kind of going into the 2D iteration first. How long did it take you to get your mind wrapped around the idea of just going directly to 3D and creating around the form versus doing a thumbnail or doing a side view? Like, what was that process like? And how did it take you to get there?
It's quite funny because you won't believe it. This was the first time I was like using Gravity Sketch. I had made some simpler models earlier on. So this was the model where I was like fully focused on developing my Gravity Sketch skills. So I just made a last out of the surface tool inside Gravity Sketch, and I just stroked some shapes out of thin air, and ended up being a great design at the end of the day. And it just took me maybe a few hours to make those sketches. The thing which Gravity Sketch is great at is you can actually create the design or sketch in 3D in real time, and it just takes maybe less time than actually sketching out with pen and pencil. So yeah, I just tried it out and it worked great.
That's cool. So we have some questions from the audience, which is great, and we're just going to kind of rattle them off. But there's a big question around like, how did you make these flowers in your rendering? Were you making these using Gravity Sketch or?
No, these were done inside Blender. So we have different plugins with Blender. So if you know procedural texturing and stuff, we can actually scatter different objects inside Blender. So if you have a flower modeled, you can actually scatter that in the ground and create the whole plane. Also, if you see the backgrounds, I have actually scattered quite some objects. So make sure that your PC is quite heavy to handle all that before scattering all that, because it's gonna be quite messed up if it's
Are
not.
those all individual? Those are all individual 3D assets.
Yes, these are all individual 3D assets made in Blender. You can actually see the whole thing in here.
Okay.
Just
Incredible.
the background is when you go to the whole background side, it will be some PNG images in the whole back, so that your laptop doesn't blow up, literally.
Yeah.
So yeah, rendering times are going to be quite harsh, so you don't want to blow up your laptop. Yeah.
Exactly. I guess just 2 more quick questions from me. One on the AR side, I found it really interesting. What file format did you use? Like, what was that pipeline to get AR? Did you? You can use FBX. So what was your workflow here?
Yeah, so what I did is I exported it from Gravity Sketch as the FBX format, and then inside Blender, I converted it into a GLTF file. I also compressed it at the same time so that it is not that heavy, because AR tech, of course, has its own limitations and the file size should be really small. So I decimated the geometry inside Blender to reduce the file size, and then exported it into Spark AR, which is one of the AR platforms by Snapchat. And I just used their tech and uploaded the whole model inside there, and that's the end result that you get. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Alan, we're going to move on to the next one. Great work, and thanks to the audience. We have Vivo Barefoot give a couple questions in here, so feel free to read the comments there, Alan.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
Again, incredible workflow, and great to kind of bring that war chest of tools and see them in action. So without further ado, we're going to move on to Desu. I'm pronouncing it properly. But he is specializing in footwear that combines performance with aesthetics, and believes that a good product is almost an interface connecting the human with nature. But I won't tell too much more. I'll let him explain himself. So Desu, welcome to the stage.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. Are you sharing, Brad?
Yeah, just give it 1 minute.
Cool.
I think Brett needs to upload yours.
There may be some misunderstanding, but I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So while we're waiting for the setup, you guys have any questions for the previous two students? Feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll keep the conversation going. Okay, let me just look at some of the chat. So yeah, the AR thing is something we've been seeing quite a bit. I was really surprised to see that in Alan's work, but it's something where like folks are using other tools to convert, but you could actually get a GLB straight out of the landing pad, or a USDZ straight out of the landing pad if you want to use your iPhone or Android. Okay, looks like we're all ready to go. I'm going to hand it over to you to see.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and listening to us today. My name is Desu. You can call me Shway, which means water in Chinese. I am 27 years old. I am from Changzhou City, China. It's a small city in the northern part of China near Beijing. And we're famous for our donkey sandwiches and kung fu, of course. My city is well known as a hometown of martial arts in China, but I don't know any of it. So I graduated from Shanghai Maritime University with a background in industrial design in 2019. And I love movies and video games. And I have a great passion for sketching and sneakers. That's why I came here to Portland, the United States, to further my study in the Master of Sports Product Design program at the University of Oregon. And now I am in my second year, and we are graduating in the next 2 weeks. Currently, we're working on our thesis projects. So I focus on performance footwear design, and my thesis project is a pair of wrestling boots for Mongolian wrestling. I also utilized Gravity Sketch for ideation, tooling, 3D printing, and prototyping in my thesis. And you guys can check out more details on it on my personal website later if you are interested. It's design.com. And I am looking for a full-time job or internship as an athletic footwear designer after graduation this year. It's my dream to work for a global sports company like Nike, Adidas, or Puma in the future. And I'm okay with any category, basketball or running. As long as it's about footwear and design, I'll be happy. And I performance and aesthetics to connect humans with nature. So in our program at the UO, the study is mainly focused on wearable products based on sports science and prototyping skills like cutting and sewing and working with all different kinds of performance textiles. That's why I chose to make my Gravity Sketch project more conceptual and add more sci-fi elements to it. So the project is called Zhurong. It's a pair of conceptual Mars boots. Zhurong is the name of the god of fire in Chinese culture, and Mars in Chinese language literally means the planet of fire. I hope that makes sense. And let's take a look at it. I built the whole environment as a space outpost to have a futuristic spacey vibe. And you can see some branding graphics here. It's Zhurong Mars boots. And then let's walk through this tunnel to the products. Through this porthole, we can see the view outside, and I have a little crew here. You can see this little dude is trying to show us the way. And in the middle of the room, I placed an enormous human wearing the boots to strengthen the feeling of the arrival of like alien objects. So I came up with the initial idea of Mars slider in the Gravity Sketch workshop during the Portland Sneaker Week last summer, and it was a quick sketch in like 20 minutes. Then I also took it as a reference for an AI art generator for more inspiration for line work. And on top of that, I wanted to bring in more features of this very first footwear design concept I did in 2018. It was also a pair of astronaut boots with protective performance. And in my mood board, I was looking at some more astronaut products, some characteristic elements of the classic boots, and the roll cage design of race cars for protection, and of course some Mars landscapes and color palettes. And then I hopped on to VR for tons of quick ideation sketches, which is a very satisfying process. I would add more details or surfacing on some interesting ones of them. And then after figuring out what I wanted, I went back to Procreate to lock down the idea in a 2D view and then brought it back into VR to build everything. And in this process, I first used the stroke tool in planner mode to transfer the line work of my sketch into Gravity Sketch. Then I removed the planarity of the strokes and created a framework as a reference for surfacing. And in the final design, I kept most of the features of classic astronaut boots and added more interesting details like the valves and stitches on the inflatable protective shell to make it more realistic, and some propulsion nozzles on the outsole for moving in a low gravity environment. And here's an X-ray view to demonstrate the construction, and an exploded view to explain the components. I have a sock liner and a warp knitted upper and a TPU reinforcement panel, and also the roll cage, the inflatable protective shell on it, and then the nozzles on the outsole. Then I exported it as an OBJ file and made the final render in Keyshot. And in the last, I want to talk about the design of the environment. I have to say that the experience of creating a building in Gravity Sketch is also space outpost on Mars. I looked into some different Mars terrains and some architectural concepts with a clean and futuristic design language. And I also made a cute, exploded view of the whole building. And here's another view of the whole room. And that's all I want to share about my Jurong Mars boots. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you.
Wow, Desu, thanks so much for sharing that. That was super impressive. You had a whole architectural proposition at the same time as having a footwear proposition.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty mind blowing. And I think on that, I will ask a question directly from the chat. Moritz in the chat here is wondering, would you say is the biggest benefit of adding Gravity Sketch to your workflow? So what was cool is that you were experiences from 2018 to 2022, now to 2023. And of course, 2018, that was a sketch. And then 2022 was when you first kicked off. Like, what was the benefit of bringing this tool into the workflow?
Yeah. So actually that design was finished in a design sketching course that I took back in China. And the instructor of the class was from Art Center College of Design. So the system we're learning is basically from the famous book How to Draw, written by Mr. Scott Robertson. It's just the kind of classic section drawing for transportation design and industrial design. It's about how to create a 3D space on a 2D surface. And actually, it's the essence of that kind of process is to create a 3D model on a 2D surface. And when I hop onto when I first got into Gravity Sketch, I felt like that kind of thing came true. Like I can define any sections on this object at my will, and it's very effective than sketching on 2D surfaces. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Like it's the thing that really caught me off guard was that you did a 3D sketch to go back into Procreate. And if you don't know, Scott is actually a heavy user of Gravity Sketch. And
Yeah.
so he did the very similar workflow. So I found that super interesting. Did you pick that up on your own, just out of intuition, or was that something that just kind of came naturally to you? Or sorry, was that something that you learned from Scott?
Sorry, I was a little laggy just now. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I was just asking if like you learned that kind of 3D design to 2D workflow from Scott, or is that something that just kind of came naturally to you? Still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you say it again, please?
Yeah, no problem. I was asking if the 3D sketching to 2D process, like where you take it into Procreate, was that something that you learned from Scott, or was that something that you picked up naturally? Oh, I hope we get him back.
More used to 2D sketch. I'm not saying like sketching a space is that doesn't feel good. It was amazing, but I'm more used to 2D sketches because it will have like more details on that kind of way for me personally. Yeah.
Well, Shway, great work. Honestly, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And 2 weeks is very close, and you're in the footwear heart of the States. So you're definitely going to be able to at least get in front of a few brands over there. Wish you all the best. And if there's anything to help you, just let us know. And without further ado, we're going to move on to the next student in the run-up. So moving smoothly into Sean here. Sean's a multidisciplinary designer specializing in the kind of innovation and storytelling, and quite meticulous with his detail. And you'll see that across some of the work that we're going to see today. So Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. And thank you to everybody who's here today. This experience has been really great, and I've learned a lot. So let me go ahead and share my screen and jump into this. Cool. So we can see this? Can we see this?
Yeah, we're all good. Go for it, Sean.
Great. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a fourth-year student in the Industrial Design program at the University of Cincinnati, DAP. I'm from Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. Moved a lot as a kid, but in the same area. And I'm into anything that I can use my physical body. Like I can actually walk or hike or climb or do anything like that. I like photography. I like weightlifting. Anything where I'm being physical is my bread and butter. And then about me as a designer, I really love storytelling, especially visually taking words and translating them into images in a really concise and refined way is something that I love to do. You can see up above here some of my teaser videos for how I did this and what I did. So I'll go ahead and jump into that now. So my story kind of begins with the Hoka Storm Chaser. So what is it? It's a high performance trail running shoe inspired by extreme supernatural conditions. It's designed to empower athletes to really push their limits and take on any challenge. But beyond the kind of marketing jargon that you might use to describe it, what does that actually mean? I specifically looked at trail running, and even more specifically, ultra marathon trail running, which has shown a huge increase in the past 10 years. I mean, almost exponential curve here. Of course, COVID dipped a little bit, but even since then, just in 2022, it was almost back at 2019 levels. So the popularity of the sport is increasing like crazy. But with that, it's one of the more dangerous types of running because 20 to 80% of trail runners experience injury every year. So you might understand why if you look at the kind of running that they're doing. Some of these trails are visible from space and take 30 hours to complete. So imagine running 30 hours with 18,000 feet of elevation gain through canyons, forests, and rivers. That would probably hurt me personally, but I'll let you decide if it would hurt you. It hurts a lot of people, so I wanted to look at how I could kind of solve for that. And so I naturally kind of came to the Hoka brand because they have such a cult following, which is really expanding. And when I say cult following, like really that means like a community. I had a friend recently text me because he knew I was working on a Hoka project. He said that he got a pair of Hokas, and it's almost like driving a Jeep where if you see another person in a Jeep, they're going to wave to you on the road. That's how strong this kind of community that they have going on is. And so I thought that that would mesh really well with the ultra marathon community for trail running. So then I went into the research phase. I could talk about this for hours, but I only have 10 minutes. So I'm just kind of going to briefly look at what I researched. I looked at all of the current trail running tech that Hoka and other brands have. I looked at all of the biomechanical needs, what kind of forces are being impacted on the foot. I did a bunch of interviews with different ultramarathon trail runners to see like, what's the community like? How can I tell this story? And also like, what do you look for in a shoe? And from that, I kind of developed the story in the creative direction around this idea of storm chasing photography. So if you've ever seen storm chasing photography, you have now because these are pictures of it. But it's got this really surreal and kind of like supernatural power and energy to it, and has like a kind of cult following similar to the other raving communities that I was talking about previously. And so I thought it was just kind of a natural aesthetic leap to kind of tie that into the fold and then bring that to a new shoe, right? So I started by going into some thumbnailing, just really quickly looking at silhouettes, trying to impart some of that power and speed and force into the shoe that I saw from the storm chasing photography. And then I took those and I refined the best ones. Did a little bit of like loose sketching here, looking at more of the technical construction, materials, logo, decal placement, even a little bit of color. And then this is where I kind of jumped into the Gravity Sketch part of things. Gravity Sketch is a fantastic tool because, I mean, these are a little bit refined. Like these aren't like super refined sketches, but then I can just like kind of explore like, does this form that I have sketched out, does that actually make sense? Is that going to fit onto a foot? Are there problems with that form that I can discover with before making like a full upper model out of cloth or whatever it is, and kind of like fail early and often. So I did a few study models. This was my first one. It's pretty crude, but it gave me a lot of information that I kind of took back to the drawing board with me. I then did a second model here, and as you can see, it's a lot more refined. And this was me looking at the different surfaces, creasing, aesthetics of the shoe. And then I did another model kind of looking at the a lot of the different like technical components and how they would fit together. And then beyond just like creating the shoe, you can actually use Gravity Sketch to ideate on parts within the shoe or things that you wouldn't think about otherwise. For this, I wanted to incorporate a carbon plate And Hoka in their Tecton X already has a split plate design that goes through the shoe, and it has a split down the center like these do. But it's only 2 plates, and the purpose of it is that it allows for proprioception when you're running sideways or down a hill. It allows your foot to remain stable. So I was looking at how could I refine that and make that kind of technology even more impactful. Um, and so I kind of overlaid these from my zonal impact area studies that I did earlier, and like what kind of forces are being impacted on the foot. And I kind of tried like, what if I did like a tri-plate design, or what if I gave the plate more of a curve upward so you have more support for the upper. And I could really kind of explore those ideas a little bit better. So then I got to my kind of final construction. And so basically, this shoe consists of a 3 knee knit sock liner, a TPU foot shield over the upper with gilly lacing, uh, a low density midsole and a high density midsole. So dual density, and then they pinched together this carbon plate, which I actually wound up going with a single plate, but it is strategically cut to give more support in the heel, a little bit more thickness in the front of the shoe to give more support, but still allow for that proprioception, and then an EVA outsole. And then I can take that and then go into my final kind of sketch render, which I'm always going to do. I could skip this, but I'm always going to do it because I'm a sucker for these, and I love the game. So I kind of have my final design here, and then I take that into Illustrator. I can come up with some interesting colorways, logo application. And then this is kind of describing my process from start to finish before I show you the final model. I go from Photoshop, sketching, Procreate, to Gravity Sketch. And I'm actually going between these a lot until I go for my final model. I'll go to a kind of more refined sub D surface, and then I'll bring that into Blender. I'll refine it there, do weight painting, texturing, and lighting, and then render that in cycles. And then here is the imported final model, and some renders and animations of it. And one thing I'd like to mention is just kind of the colorway here with like this almost faux metallic, and the texturing that I did in Blender as well. Kind of adding more detail points to kind of hone the story and try and tell the right one, right? So that was pretty much it for my project. Before I hand it off for questions, I want to thank Ryan Crouch, Alexander Ordonez, Mac McMillan, Sam Amos, and the whole Gravity Sketch team. They've all been phenomenal, helped me a lot. I wouldn't have been able to do this without them. And of course, I'd like to thank everybody who showed up today to support this program. It means a lot. So with that, I'd like to hand it off for any questions.
Well done. Very well done, Sean. It was very impressive. And I know Alejandro over there at the University of Cincinnati quite well. He's one of the early adopters of Gravity Sketch. So
Yeah,
I can see his influence has passed on to the pupils, which has been great. I want to talk a little bit about you mentioned physical and your physical interest in design. And one of the things that we often have in Gravity Sketch is this idea of a physical interface. I wanted to kind of see if you made any of those kind of connections while you were developing this shoe, and then also just how does these two things interplay into your design process?
So by the physical interface, do you mean the actual UI that's connected to your hand?
Yeah, exactly. We tried to build something that was more like a workshop rather than a desktop, if you can kind of get the analogy there.
So what that has done is, like, people often kind of express a lot of value in Gravity Sketch because of the ideation potential, which is like probably the biggest thing with it. But I didn't know sub-D modeling before Gravity Sketch. I tried to learn it several times in Blender, and the UI in Blender is like kind of notoriously complex. But when I went into Gravity Sketch, just being able to grab things with my hands, specifically like points, and move them with my hands, making things a tactile experience, like I think kind of understood it within a week. Just like
Mm.
it was like an instant kind of realization of how it works. So that's like one of the huge things is just like Gravity Sketch can actually teach you how to model in other programs too. That was one of my
Yeah.
kind of eureka moments. And then in terms of like how that applies to my design process, I have never been like a huge like, make primitive shapes and then bevel and then like, step 1, step 2, step 3, like a modeling tree approach. I've always been kind of like more sculptural, kind of looking at it like a block of clay. And in Gravity Sketch, I can like I can just go in there and mess around for for like a few minutes and come out with something that looks insane or just like looks like something I've never seen before. So like it really opens up this whole other level of ideas and designs and shapes and things that you can do that you just don't get with like a traditional modeling software like Fusion's 360 um, or like the primitives in Rhino.
Yeah. What I really enjoyed about your project was the level of research, and that's also echoed here in the chat. It seems like you really went deep. Like 20 to 80% of people are experiencing injuries in these journeys that they're taking, and it's like what 18,000 feet elevation over the course of the journey. What's the most
Yeah.
common industry that we're seeing that you've saw in your research, and how is the design proposal that you have working with the plate design kind of helping to alleviate the strain and stress on this industry on those athletes?
The most common industry that I saw, this isn't actually like statistically true, but when I was talking to people who were in the community, one of the biggest things that's like not really looked at as a huge issue is um, the again being able to uh, sidestep or go down hills. That can be like catastrophic. I mean, imagine you haven't slept in 24 hours. You have 6 hours left of the race and you're still running and you have to go down a hill. I might not make it, honestly, especially if it's a gravelly. Like, so the plate specifically, I'll go back to the design there. The plate actually allows for um, the heel to stay rigid, basically, and the stack height is super high on Hokas as well. So with that high stack height, you can have a lot more cushion. So over the long run, that's really going to help. But having that plate, you can have a rigid heel and then flex towards the ends of your feet. So you can flex in the middle here, which will actually help keep your feet stable um, and keep you from like rolling an ankle or something, which could be catastrophic. That would mean you're out of the game for months, which is like decades in this world. So that was one of the big things. But it also just helps with like when you have a force hitting your heel or your toes over and over and over again for 30 hours, that fatigue is going to build up over time. And so having a high stack height gives you a lot more cushion. But with that, if you don't have a plate, you'll get more rolling. You'll be on a less stable surface. So the plate gives you this kind of like it's like a cheat code almost to be able to like stack the shoe higher and kind of deaden zones where you want more stability, like the heel where it's pounding over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, Yeah, I wanted to just comment also on the flow, the workflow, and like even the explanation that you took us through. I think it's amazing to use all these different tools in combination, but also the fact that you end up, you still love the sketch, the kind of the stylistic sketch, and you're always going to build that sketch into your journey.
Yeah.
I would encourage you never to lose that, because no matter where you end up, you're going to be able to have like this war chest of tools.
Mhm.
And speaking of where you end up, we hear that you're off to an internship relatively soon, and I'll actually leave it to you to share a little bit more about your internship. And what I'd love to hear is like, what are you hoping to do next or achieve next there in terms of learning and development?
So over the summer, I'm gonna have a pretty busy summer. I have an ongoing internship with Shway Recht, who's an artist and designer out of Australia right now, but a lot of time he's in Iceland. And with him, I've been working on a lot of material development, wearables, a lot of like physical stuff, and it's very discursive. It's kind of artistic, but it also kind of straddles the line between art and design. And then I just landed, like you said, an internship for until August with a small company out of Japan called Aliveform. And what they do currently is kind of similar to what Zellerfeld does. They do a kind of ready to order like 3D printed shoes. But their whole ethos is about kind of the organics of it. For them, I'm going to be working on a line of monomaterial wearables that can be recycled and printed from anywhere. Monomaterial, it's going to be, I think, some shoes and apparel, stuff in that area. But then after August, I'm free for another internship, which is required as part of my schooling. So from August to December.
Well, we'll try to get you set up with another internship. The Japan internship sounds really interesting because we just talked about the structure and the construction of the shoe and the cheat code. And I can definitely see in 3D printing how you can build in structures to essentially emulate some of that kind of cheat code within the sole, and almost in an invisible way.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you so much for your time and amazing presentation. Wish you all the best. Are you actually going to go over to Japan, or are you going to be based in home?
I'm based in Cincinnati because I am still in school for the semester too.
Oh, okay, got it.
So, but I might fly over there for like an event or something. We'll see. That'd be cool.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. Honestly, when I first saw your shoe come up on my Slack, it was like, oh, is this something new from Hoka? And it was like I was very much like, oh, must be from one of the customers, but this is what was from you. So like, really well done. Really impressed, and looking forward to seeing where you end up after Japan.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Without further ado, we're going to welcome Michael to the stage, Australian, and recently completed his internship with Adidas in the specialist sports team. And he's kind of continuing his research in sustainable innovation, footwear design, and manufacturing. So, Michael, I'm going to hand it over to you to share a little bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Thanks, Shway. I don't know if my head's on the screen, but there we go.
Got you. Good to see you again.
Hey, how's it going? They saved the rest for last, so thank you. Got a few words for you, and then hopefully we can have a bit of a chat. Instead of picking a single project for you, I've done a lot in Gravity Sketch, so I figured I'd kind of just showcase what I've been doing for the last few years. And the journey from that. So I'm currently back home finishing up my industrial design bachelor's with QUT after having finished my time in Herzo with the sports specialist team at Adidas. They're a great bunch. There's a couple here at the moment. Glad to speak with them and see them again. Upon graduating in December, I'll be looking to get back into industry, seeking a full-time role. In the meantime, I've actually started a brand. I hope that will get leveraged by the research that's planned in my final capstone subjects at uni in the second half of this year. And the focus on it is functional, sustainable, tailored footwear. It's designed for performance and recovery. So hoping to explore into different categories of sport through that venture in my spare time. I've got a sports background, played a lot of rugby and basketball for a long time in my youth. The body maintenance that was involved in that definitely helped me gain a good fundamental understanding of how shoes solve problems for their users. Nowadays, I challenge myself by exploring different ways to apply or improve on those methods. I enjoy abstracting and innovating on design norms. That's in a lot of my work, and that translates to unconventional applications of new technologies that I find, and also materials, and also some generally unconventional aesthetics. I'll get Brett to hit through some of those viewpoints there. You can kind of see some of the recent projects that I've hit. This first one was the entry task that I conducted to get into Adidas's internship program. It was designed for basketball, and it was essentially just a very conceptual application of some of the technologies that they use. People that know, they 3D print with carbon, so I was trying to implement resin-based solutions there. Minimal grindery, completely sustainable. Then if you want to move on, Brett, there was before I joined the internship, I knew I was going to run out of my opportunities to make weird things, so I started exploring other technologies that I could, and then just different artistic applications that Gravity Sketch really enabled. Really similar to Sean, who I have to give a big clap to. He really nailed that. Super similar workflow process of trying to apply really functional application. So to get the chance to do some weird stuff in between all that, it was essential for me. This project that's up on the screen now was a ID6 program at QUT. Systems design, I focused on the small cohort of public school children in my local region and how to create sustainable footwear options for them. This is also an additive manufacturing process, which has kind of become a theme in footwear at the moment. You've seen it through all of the previous presentations today. And then the last one in this little section was just one of the big projects I did before I got any kind of opportunity. It was just this homage concept from Adidas's application. You'll see between this and the first one that I showed, I created a complete mimic of the 4D latticing. If anything, it was my little cheat code to get some attention from Addy when I got the internship. I'm sure Uta and Valentine can probably confirm that if they're in the crowd. So we can move on to the next section. And this is kind of a summary of what I can show from my time at Addy. We called this the Hidden Faces project. I had a lot of work with Addy. I can't show that from the sports specialist team, but every spare moment that I had, I also moved into doing this. The nature of products in the regular job were highly functional and had to oblige to a really strict set of best practice. So while that taught me a heap of really valuable lessons, I always wanted to see how I could apply that to the weird. So this was how I satiated that hunger. I was able to connect with Adidas's Herzog & Alder Maker Lab team, and under their guidance and support, formed a little mini BU with all the other interns to create a mini collection that was without constraint. The goal was to create a sustainable performance collection. It was without commercial ruling, and the end result for my footwear piece was a 3D printed, single material, modular pair of shoes designed to handle lifestyle, outdoor, and court activities, which is very far-reaching, I know. The project helped me to break into new design and manufacturing methods. They ultimately can't be scaled to the levels that Adidas need, but scalable or not, I believe they have a value and a place in footwear design, as we can see with the emergence of Zellerfeld, Alive Form, all of these groups. This informs the direction for my new project of the same namesake, Hidden Faces. I'll let Brett scroll through some of the zoom-ins on this section here. The shoe itself went through a heap of iterations. I've got a few here that I nabbed before I flew back over. And they led to just different ways of thinking about how we approach this 3D design for footwear. Gravity Sketch in itself really enabled me to try to push the straight to design for manufacture route. Anybody that's in the industry viewing right now knows that Gravity Sketch is within the workflow process, and I really wanted it to merge with product development and see where it can assist CAD development in bigger programs like Blender and Rhino to, just get rid of the bulk of the forming and sub-D modeling that's needed. I've been able to apply that to some degree. I mean, these guys didn't go through any post-programming. That was straight out of Gravity Sketch. I was able to print these things. It was just with some consideration. And then you take what you learn from that and then see where you have to change. So as you get on from there, you know, you have to go into Blender and all these other programs that have huge skill gaps. But like Sean said, Gravity Sketch teaches you the basic elements you need to then understand what you're doing in those programs. So time for the unveiling. Hidden faces. We seek to propel footwear. The AdPerf line is our first venture into performance and recovery. You can go to the next slide there, Brett. The collection implements the same sustainable approach of single material, 3D printed footwear with the addition of a tailored fit and support specific to the activities therefore. AdPerf Rec on the left, that'll be developed for release with Zellerfeld. They're an emerging 3D manufacturer. If you don't know them yet, I encourage you to look into them. I can provide a little link to that in the chat. It's something that the previous shows you've seen today are definitely implementing as well. The shoe on the left, AdPerf Rec, is a walking shoe. It's designed to promote gait transition in walking and relieving stress on major muscle groups following heavy exercise. So it's essentially for between the big activities. AdPerf Run on the right, it's designed for recovery and training runs that will be developed for independent consult and manufacture following the same sustainable practice, but it will also implement additional data collection methods to create personalized cushioning and lockdown systems that promote user longevity. I'm not going to show the research here, but essentially back in 22, the report came out and they've enabled a proper system to implement CAD structures to create personalized volumetric latticing in a way that can really benefit people. And I'd like to implement that kind of knowledge and apply it in my own way. So this is where I hope to take it for my final semester. In here, you can see the AdPerf Run model. It's an iterative development, so you can see there are slight aesthetic changes. In the bottom right there, you can see the base model that I completely formed in Gravity Sketch following lasts from Zellerfeld. And then there's been updates in Blender that I had to implement different forms of displacement surface texturing to try to get this texture. Trying to take it from approach of knowing that we work with an open mesh structure when you print with Zellerfeld. They're trying to work on closed wall, but for the most part, you're going to have this open structure. So seeing how I can play with the surface texturing in a way that makes that interesting. Yeah. And then the next section, that's moving into this very speculative concept. The visuals are likely to change. I'm just looking into how I'm going to apply essentially an open latticed structure in a way where I can adjust that density to really help users in a personalized way. They follow a similar lasting and construction, but from a performance point of view, this has an adjusted heel stack, a more forward-oriented pitch to promote forefoot running, just a bunch of things that are a combination of best practice and new approaches to innovation in the game, I guess. You can go to the next slide there, or the next viewpoint. We'll talk a bit more about the workflow that I use in Gravity Sketch for this. I was lucky that while I was with Addy, I used a heap of it that I can't show, but in that, I was able to consult with Gravity Sketch directly, product developers, designers, and really figure out what is the workflow I need to take here that's going to be quick, efficient, and streamline really well into the existing approach that most of these big companies seem to be using, which is very sketch-oriented and then consultation-based between factory and prod dev. So I can take my drafted sketches. You can go to the next slide, Brett. I partially pre-develop them from research and ideation. You know, I start with the thumbnails. I move into iterative overlay sketching, trying my shortlisted ideas and combining them, and then end up with really just a lateral view and an outsole proportion if I need it. Then I pull those lines into volumes surrounding a last for modeling and detail refinement. Intuitive mirroring and snap tools really speed up this workflow dramatically. Once happy with that design draft, I can then quickly and really flexibly develop the surfacing for the entire model with my line tools, whether single or multi-layered. Gravity Sketch has a really great suite of tools that ensure you don't end up with a messy subdivision, which for anybody moving into CAD is the first step to figure out how to make something that isn't just a total mess for when you're trying to visualize it. Iterative development of these base assets is really easy. It allows for full exploration of those ideas without using excess time. So that's why I only use a lateral sketch, because by the time I get to the medial, I've already thought of all these new things just from seeing the proportions. So playing around with every outcome you could possibly think of in a way that you can apply it like none other. You just can't do that in sketching. So really opens up the workflow in a quicker way. Once I'm happy with that asset, I can really easily export it to model it in post. In this case, I continued modeling in Blender to get some of the refinement needed. took it into Keyshot for some rendering. It's a pretty simple process in Keyshot, but Blender is the next step for me. That's where I really need to figure out computational and volumetric design to hopefully implement into the degree. Thanks for the time on the spiel. That was a bunch of written word. I'm a bit tired at the moment. I would have just cuffed it otherwise. But yeah, I'll open up the floor to any questions that anybody has, and hopefully Brett can navigate back to the pages of relevance.
Michael, first of all, thanks for being up so late.
That's
really
early.
appreciate
Yeah.
early. Really appreciate you spending some time with us here. We met a few years ago now in Herzo, pre-pandemic.
Oh
time.
yeah, just back in September. I wanted to ask you about that because you played it really low key. You didn't let me know your role, but and I was talking your ear off.
Well, I'd like to be. I just like to be. I'd like to be on the ground and experience what you guys are experiencing. No need to throw the title around. But one of the questions I had for you the whole time was like, your process is so developed, and in fact, the team that you worked with, Ute is in the call actually from
Yeah,
from the
Valentin,
team.
who is showing from Vivo, he was also a previous member. Yeah, I'm really glad they're here. They can speak to how bold it became. Yeah.
I mean, essentially, your team was definitely one of the most advanced teams that we have at Adidas, and I have to give you some credit for helping them onboard and learn. But I guess what are some of the things that you saw in terms of friction for introducing new technologies such as monomaterial design and construction, as well as bringing in new tools and technologies, Blender, Gravity Sketch, and so forth into these larger organizations, because there's a huge thirst and need that they want to get things different and change up their workflow. But I think there's a lot of barriers, and I have never worked in the industry. So every time I go, again, I'm like a student. I try to suck up as much as possible, but there's very little I can do in one trip. And you get to spend a quite considerable amount of time with them. What do you think some of the challenges are for a company to change their workflow and start adopting some of the insights, methodologies that you have presented here?
Current systems in place. That's probably the best summary. It's a lot of old dog, new tricks, and that's not impeded by enthusiasm. Everybody wants to know about the new thing, but when you've got a supply chain and a system working at such a huge scale, they have a communication process that relies on certain programs, and then once you're adept in those, I mean, they just don't want to risk wasting the time having to learn that new system. Some do, and some are more than willing to. And the SPSP team in particular was excellent. That was a team of serious veterans, all 20-year plus, and half of them were dying to get into that headset every chance they got. So that really helped me get their support in talking to other teams. The main changes and adaptations to workflow were just seeing where Gravity Sketch can sit in either as visual communication or as something a bit more technical to assist the next stage in product development. At this stage, I think it's really effective for that workflow integration. So quick communication, Screen Collab allows that. Quick iterative development, quick volume and form communication between people, super effective. The next step in Gravity Sketch, already clearly on it, this is figuring out how to get that really quick translation between CAD programs. And it works well at the moment, but everything can be perfected. I'd say the best example is like in this model that Brett's moving up to now. I created all those creases, which is really common in Gravity Sketch for the base model. You take that low poly asset into Blender, and then it completely deforms it, and you have to apply all those creases back. So you have to remember the roadmap. Small steps like that can frustrate people who have a very fine-tuned workflow and a very quick process of operation. So, I'd say those kinds of learning curves can either be assisted with changes to the program or just taught, and they're taught quickly. So it's all up from there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can imagine in automotive, another vertical we service, it's a massive machine. The second you pull the trigger on a project, you have, seatbelt manufacturers, you have folks that are doing tire design, and it's kind of a waterfall effect. So changing a process is quite challenging. But what I see in all the work that the students are doing and folks like Zillerfeld is they're kind of rewriting the playbook for footwear, and it is going to take a while for these larger organizations to fully adopt it. And I guess my question to you, and we're just on the end of our session here, but we'd love to end with this. Where do you think you could stay on the Hidden Faces and continue working with your brand, but as you go back into the industry, where do you think you're going to have the most impact to learn and help push the industry and guide the industry in this direction, knowing it's going to be a slow battle and your brand is probably going to be working 20 years ahead of some of these organizations? Yeah. So where are you looking to position yourself next?
Yeah, so I've designed Hidden Faces to work as an auxiliary. I've got a great co-founder and a colleague that I met through uni. I'm hoping that from the consultation base, it can just all sit and exist here, and I can just help in facilitation from a distance, so that I can enter back into the industry. I've only been back for 2 months, and I'm tired of being in the wrong hemisphere for meetings. So yeah, I want to be back in the game. You say it's 20 years ahead. It's not, man. I've been in there, and they're fully capable of it. They explore it actively. These innovation teams, they go to all ends, and all of it you really never see. It's kind of that Adidas Brooklyn Farm thing of just endless iterations coming out, and that kind of dictates the creative direction moving forward. It's in the scalable technology. Like, are you the only ones? Well, Peak, Enter, they've been able to do 3D printed footwear, but it's super high price points and not in a way that really encompasses the promising future of that technology of being a super sustainable one-to-one supply-demand manufacturing system. That's just stuff that Addy and all these other big groups can't facilitate. They've got to pre-manufacture, they've got to forecast. I think at the current, to say that it's not 20 years behind or ahead is to say these smaller bespoke groups are already creating great outcomes. Zellerfeld are killing it. They've got constraints. They can't make performance products yet. They'd have to change their process. But at the same time, I think they've already figured out variable density material and printing. So world's their oyster. I could see a performance product. I mean, if they want me involved, I'd hope to try to make them something in the next couple of years. So hopefully it happens a lot quicker. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Ute and the Herzog guys are keen to have you back. So you probably have
I miss them a lot.
So
that's great words. Yeah. It was fun to be there. Yeah.
Michael, thanks so much for spending time with us, and really impressive to see your progress with the tool, and congratulations on the brand.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for everybody else coming along. Yeah. And to the other presenters, I mean, everybody nailed it. It's awesome work.
Yeah, it's been great. And yeah, thank you all for attending. This has been, a true pleasure. Wrapping up the 2023 cohort with Footwear is a real treat for me. It's the industry I know the least amount about, so I'm always really keen and trying to play a student role in these sessions myself, just learning as much as possible. I want to give a huge thank you to the students. They put a tremendous amount of work into this, and I also want to give a massive thank you to our Gravity Sketch education team. It's one of the things that we decided to do out of the gate at Gravity Sketch. So day one, we were testing with students. In fact, students got to use the product far before any customers did. And I was adamant about building an education team in parallel with our more commercial team that actually has to bring revenue in. But I truly think that students are the key to understanding future workflows and where industries will move, for the very point that Michael made, where we can experiment on this stuff at smaller scale, but moving into big scale makes change management quite difficult. And being on the ground floor with students, you can actually challenge the industry and challenge the status quo. So my message to the students is to continue to push the boundaries. I like that what we saw today was nothing that you would go and walk out and try to pick up at a Foot Locker, right? It was definitely things that were pushing the norms, pushing the environments, pushing, what the perception of a shoe actually is in many cases. And this kind of thing, I think, is going to help us, almost the way I try to imagine it is the concept car in automotive industry. The concept car is so many years out, and you usually just take elements of that car to inform the next generation. And I think that what students are doing is helping us define that for various industries, the concept workflow, or in the footwear case, some of these are concept footwear designs with manufacturing process, with environments they may exist in. And one thing that someone told me a while back when they were asking me, why are you guys going into footwear? And I had to kind of liaison with a couple of footwear designers I knew in Portland, and they said, think about it more practically. There's how many billion people on this planet, and you can times that by 2 for how many feet there are out there. And I thought that was a really keen insight that I had never really put together myself. So again, it's an amazing industry to work in, and I'm so excited to see new materials, processes, and ways of working. If you out there are interested in meeting one of these amazing students, please feel free to reach out, get in touch. We posted the link a few times in the chat, but also if you're watching this as a pre-recorded, you can reach out to our EDU team through the site, or probably a link is going to accompany wherever you're viewing this. So please feel free to click through. And I want to thank everyone together. This is a community coming together, students, the community of customers that we currently have right now, as well as professionals that are maybe not from any of the industries we currently serve that are still using our tool and challenging their workflow. We want to build this together with you all. It's not a, we build this and you use it. It's inform us, tell us how to do things better. And already from this presentation, I've learned a ton. So look forward to doing this next year, and just want to give you one last huge thanks, or round of applause if we were in an audience. So appreciate your time, and best of luck to all the students and to you all in the audience.